So what is in this video? In this video, I'll create a nodeJS REST API where the server receives JSON and sends JSON back to the client. And I'll use the SQLite from Mapbox, the nodeJS implementation of the C SQLite server. And we will be using this as an example of receiving JSON and sending JSON to the client, and also receiving form data and doing some database functions and sending the result to the client. And also I will be having a Unity C# client for the database. We will create a JSON string using the JSON utility in Unity, and we'll be doing the basic serialization and deserialization using the JSON utility. And lastly, I will create a Dockerfile for the server so you can deploy it wherever you want, and I'll have an example of deploying the server on MobiledgeX. So the requirements for this video: first, you need to have Visual Studio Code. This is what I use for Node.js. And you need to have Unity for sure. And you need to download Docker Hub. If you don't have Docker Hub on your machine, I'm gonna put a link in the description of where you can download it, and some video of someone who's explaining how to download it. And also you need to understand the promises of Node.js, or the concept of asynchronous functions. I really like Traversy Media explanation of this concept, and you can also check the Node.js documentation. So I'll put link to both of those in the video description. And optional, you need to have a MobiledgeX account, because this is what we will use in deploying the server. So I'm gonna put a link in the description how to create an account, and you can start deploying your server there. But you can use also the Dockerfile to deploy this server wherever you want. And if you didn't understand anything from me in this video, please make sure to check the written article or the written version of this video on my Medium articles. I'll put a link to the description. I apologize in advance if the video is lengthy and if I stutter a lot, but I hope this is gonna help someone. And if you have any feedback, please let me know about this in the comments section. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the video or learned something from it. So I'm gonna create the package.json, npm init, give it the y flag, and we have the package.json, then clear, and then npm. I will import the modules that we would use. We will basically use Express for handling web requests, SQLite 3, which is a Mapbox open source SQLite implementation for Node.js, very useful. And also we'll be using body parser as a middleware for parsing the post body, the JSON and the form data. So I'll go ahead and import all those. And SQLite 3. Alright, so I have my packages here. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a script called util.js, and this will be mainly for the database functions, but the server code, like handling the web request and the Express module, will be in the app.js, as this will be the main server that we'll be using. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this. clear util.js. I have an empty util.js here. First, I'm gonna import the SQLite module. So I'm gonna say const SQLite require SQLite 3. And then I will enable the verbose model flag so I can read the log messages or the errors. And next we need to create the database. I say const db equal new SQLite database, and I'll just give it a random name. What about data.db? And I think we are ready to create like SQL statements. So I'll start by I'll create a table. So the way I'm gonna do it, I'm just gonna have it without any function here. I'm gonna just type create table, and then I'll use if not exists, which will make sure that we create this table once on this database, otherwise it will not create it. I'll try to pick some data types that cover it all, or cover what SQLite support. So I'm just gonna name the table users, and I'll have the first column as ID, and the ID will be text. So I can just create a random ID on the Unity client, and I'll make it unique. And also I'll create a username name, which is going to be a text. The data type is going to be a text. And I'll create an age, and the data type will be integer, which is int here. And I will add a height, and I'll make it real, which is for floating numbers. And this will create the data, create the table in the database if the table is not already there. Next, I think I'm gonna implement the CRUD function for functions for relational databases, which is basically create, read, update, delete. So I'll start with this. I'll just keep the comments here. So let's say create a user, and then select users and update users, delete users. Okay, so let's start with creating a user. Creating a user basically means insert into the table a new row. So for this, all of the database functions are asynchronous functions. Since this is happening like using this API, the SQLite, I will be doing them in a promise. So if the insertion in the database happens smoothly without errors, then the promise will resolve. If it didn't, there will be a rejection, and I will just send I'm not gonna send the error to the Unity client. I'm just gonna send them success or error, at least for the create users, update users, and delete users. And for the select users, for sure, we need to return the rows of the users. So if you don't know the concept of promises in Node.js, I highly recommend you checking Traversary Media promises. Like, this guy is amazing. Or you can always Google the documentation on Node.js about promises, and I think it will set you in a good place to continue. All right, so I'm gonna create a synchronous function insert user, and I'll pass here ID, username, age, and height, right? And the way we're gonna do it is we're gonna return a new promise, and this promise will have a callback, resolve and reject, and inside those we will do our SQL statement. So there's two ways to do it. I like the statement preparation. You can check the SQLite documentation. They have very clear examples. So I'm just gonna create a var statement equal database dot prepare, and then it's gonna throw my statement, which is basically insert into users values. So I'm just gonna put 4 question marks. And then I'm gonna pass those parameters in here. We have already here. And that would be it for the statement. Next, we have to run the statement. Actually, I'm not gonna use the lambda. I'm gonna use function, and I'll tell you why in a second. So we're gonna run the statement. We have the SQL statement, and those are the arguments that we're gonna supply in this statement. In the question mark, we have them in order, so we should be good. So once I run the statement, if there is an error, it will be in the callback. Otherwise, this error will be null. So if there is an error, I just wanna reject the promise, and here I wanna pass the error. I will log it in the server, but I don't want to bother the user with the error. I just show them an error message just to make the example simpler. And the reason I used function, not the lambda, is basically this statement dot run. It can return if you want to print the logs. You can it comes the context of the function, which is this. If you are using the lambda approach, which is like this, you can't access this. And when you run statement run, this comes with two the object have two items. The first one is I think last ID, and the other one is this dot changes, which have the changes that happen after the statement was run. But maybe we can print it on the update. I'll just keep it like that for now. Then we have to do statement dot finalize, and also the finalize object, the finalize callback comes with like if the with a callbacks parameter have an error. So if there is an error, we can catch it. we can reject the promise. So I'm gonna if there is no error, resolve, and I'll not pass anything in the resolve callback. Otherwise, reject with the error. And that should be the function, the insert user function, to insert the user into the database. Okay. And basically we're gonna do this function. I'm just gonna copy and paste this function to update a user or delete a user, which is gonna be a promise also, but the statement will be different. Delete user first, it's easier. So I'm gonna do delete user. And here I just need the user ID so I can delete them. So I'm gonna replace this statement with delete from users where ID equal. I'm just gonna remove the equal, maybe question mark, and just like that. And the same, if there is an error, reject the promise. If there is no error, resolve, which is basically the same, right? And I'm gonna copy this and do the update. I think I already did. So update user. And here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do the SQL statement for update. So I'm gonna do the update statement, which is update users, it's lowercase, set. So everything can change except the ID of the user. So I'm gonna set username equal question mark, and age equal question mark, height question mark, where ID equal question mark. As you can see here, I have just to change, let me just close this. Here I have to change the order. So we have username, age, height, and then ID. So I'm just gonna move ID here. And the same, like if there is an error, reject. Otherwise, resolve the promise. And this is the update user. So for selecting users, it's gonna be different. I'm not gonna use the prepare statement. I'm gonna use the database.all. I'll show you, but we will do the same. Basically, we will be using a promise, and we reject it if there is an error, and resolve if there is none. So I'm just gonna rename this to get users, and we don't need any parameter here. I'm assuming there is no authentication, just for the sake of explaining this. And just because this is different, I'm just gonna delete all of this, and we have an empty promise. So I'm gonna say let SQL, to a SQL statement, equal select all from users. So I'm just returning all users. And for this, the way it works, I'm just gonna call db.all, and then the first one is the SQL statement. Parameters. We are not passing any parameters here. And then the callback, which the callback have the first the first argument in the callback is the error, and the second one is the rows, if there is any. And we will be basically just returning the rows to the client. So we check for the error, and if there is any, reject, and then we pass the error. If there is no, then we resolve. I think I will also check if rows equal undefined. I'm gonna reject also. I just pass an error here. No rows or no users in database. Otherwise, I will resolve the promise with the rows obtained from the select statement. So I think that's about it. We have the insert users, get users, and update users, delete users. You can modify all of those. For the sake of the example, I'm just keeping it simple. And then we have, of course, since we will be using this util.js in our server, which is going to be another script, we need to just export those functions so we can call them. And I'm just gonna pass here insert user, I think get users, update user, and delete user. So now that we have all of our functions ready, I'm just gonna delete this line. I'm just gonna run this to make sure that it's working. No, at least this line, I want to create the table. So let's see. I'm gonna say nodeJS and then run. And I think it created the database here, which have this. I'm assuming it have this users table. So next will be the server. Let's jump to that. So I'm gonna name my server app.js, and this will be our actual web server. And for the server, this is where we will have the Express server, and also we'll be handling all of the web requests, the post and the get web requests. So I'll start by just importing my modules. So I say const express equal require express. Next I need to import body parser. Require it's called body parser. And I need to import also the module I just created, which is util require dot util. Yeah, I'm just gonna create a constant for the port. Just gonna use my favorite 3000. And yeah, that's it. Next we just need to create the express app. So I'm gonna say const app equal new express, and then I'll listen to this port and just print the callback to make sure that we are everything's working as intended. So I'm just gonna print listening on board. If it's working. All right, looks like it's working. So next I need to initialize body parser. So I need body parser to parse JSON and also to parse form data. So I'm gonna say app.use body parser.json, and same for the form data, body parser dot URL encoded, and extended equal false. So I think everything is in place right now. Let's go ahead and just put our post and get request, how we can handle them. So basically we will have for insert in the database and update database and deleting database, we will or deleting users and database, I would use post request, and for getting users from database I would use get. Of course you need to have some authentication around all of this, and probably you need to get like specific users, so you can take the function that we created here in util.js and just customize it the way you want. Depends on like your business logic, but for now I'm just gonna stick to those. Post I think the first one, I'm just gonna name it create underscore user, and here I'll have my request and my result, and I'm just gonna copy and paste this for the other ones. I'm gonna call this update user, and for this one I'm gonna call delete user, and the only get request that we have is the get users from database. I'm just gonna change this to get, and here I'm just gonna rename this to get users. We don't need this anymore. Okay, so for creating users I will assume that I'm gonna be sending JSON from Unity to the server, which the JSON have the user data. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna say var ID, just copy and paste. You have my ID, username, age, and height equal request dot body, assuming that the user will be in the body as a JSON. I'm here doing just basic destructuring, and not body person body, and then I will call the util for dot insert user, and I will pass those parameters. Okay, So here I'll just code util dot insert user, and I'll pass those four parameters as arguments, and then I'm gonna get the promise if it's resolved without errors. I'm just gonna we don't pass anything in the insert here. If it's resolved, the callback is empty. I'm just gonna call res.send success. Then I'm gonna catch an error. If there is a rejection here or here, I'm gonna catch the error, and then console log the error on the server. But I'm not gonna send it to the client. I'm just gonna send the client res.send error. I think I'm gonna treat create user and update user the same way. The Unity client will send a JSON that contains the user. So I'm just gonna copy and paste those here, and everything will be the same except here. I will just use the update user. Let me double check. Update users, we pass the four arguments, and we reject with the error, resolve with empty. So it's almost the same, except we changed the path and the function that we are calling. And when it comes to delete users, let me look at the delete. Close the terminal. So here we pass only the ID. I don't think we need JSON for this. I'm just gonna say our ID equal the body dot ID, and then basically we're gonna do the same here, but instead I'm gonna call delete user and pass only the ID, and yeah, same here. I'm just gonna return success if everything is good. If there is an error, I'm not gonna bother the client. I'm just gonna print the error on the server and send the client an error. Last is the get users. So here what I have is let me see. So we don't pass anything to the function, we just run the statements and return the rows. So that's easy. So I'm gonna type util get users, and then if the promise is resolved, here I should be resolving returning the rows. So then function here, it will return the rows. I'm just gonna send the rows as JSON. So I'm gonna create a variable called response, make it an object, and I would say response dot users equal rows, and I will send this to the client. I have to also convert the object to JSON. So I'm gonna type stringify, and then I'm gonna do response. So I created an object, and then I added this element users, which equal the rows, and then I'm going to send to the client not the object but the JSON. So I have to do JSON.stringify this to convert this object to JSON, and that should be it. let me test this before we jump to the client. So I'm gonna do a small test here. I'm just gonna run node app.js, and it's doing, there's no errors, but you shouldn't trust that. I'm just gonna type curl p localhost 3000 and get, what we say, got underscore users. Yeah, I typed so users are empty, which means, and there is no error thrown here. Let me check. So yeah, this should be good. Okay, so I think that's it for the server. So now that we have the server running on localhost, I'm gonna build a Docker container, a Docker image, then a Docker container, so we can deploy the server wherever we want, and we can access it over the internet. So other people, or like if you're creating a multiplayer game, or other clients outside your local network can access it. So the way it works, I have to create a Dockerfile, then build an image using this Dockerfile, and then I can upload my Docker image to the cloud or to the edge, and I can have my container or my server running over this cloud service or edge service, and other people or other clients can access it. This will be really useful if you're building a game, or a multiplayer game, or any kind of project that you're working on that you need other clients outside your local network to access it. So I'm gonna create the Dockerfile first. And when we are creating the image, we don't need to have the node modules. Maybe we didn't use a lot here, but generally speaking, we shouldn't upload the node modules. So I'm gonna delete it for now, because you see there is a lot of modules in it. We're gonna install it on the container once the container is deployed. So I'm gonna type from nodeJS or node 12, which is the environment that we're using. And then I'm gonna set my work directory. I'm gonna set it to user, source, app. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy those two package.json or package-log.json and package.json from the container to the working directory. And then I'm gonna run npm install So when I run npm install, I will run it inside the container, and after this is done, I want to copy whatever in the container to user, source, app, and on the once on the working directory, I want to run this command line, which is node app.js, like we do in our terminal on the local machine. And finally, I need to expose the port that we are using, which is 3000. So now this is the Docker file. This is like the the instruction or the interface that our Docker image will follow. So again, it's Docker image, and then we have to call build, press enter, and it's doing the steps that we specified here. So it's first it's importing the environment, and then specifying the work directory, and then copying the to package.json, and it runs npm install, and you can see all of the steps are here. Step 5 and 6 and 7. So now we successfully tagged this server, SQL Server version 1. Next is that we have the image already. We are going to deploy it, so we can access it from everywhere. So I'm using here the MobiledgeX. You can just go to console.mobiledgex.net. I already have an account. If you don't have an account, go to register, and yeah, like you need to create an account. And currently they are not charging right now. So it's very good if you want to learn and like explore their features. Create an account. The account will be locked. Just reach out to them on the Discord server, and they will unlock the account for you. But right now I'm just gonna log into my account, and this is the organization that will be working through. Just go to apps, and then I'll create an first of all, if you go here to the organization, if I double click here, they have here all the instructions that you need to upload an application. First you need to run docker login -u, and then put your username. I think I'm already logged in, so I'm just gonna start from here. I'm just gonna copy this and go to my terminal and change the parameter that they have here. So your application, if you remember, we just named our server SQL server, and the version is 1.0. And this is I'm uploading this to another registry, their registry, which is docker.mobiledgex.net, and I made sure this is my account, and I'm just gonna add this image that I have on my local machine to the image on the MobiledgeX. I'm just gonna rename it the same, SQL Server, and the version is gonna be 1.0. So I've done this step. I think next is just gonna copy this line. So it's a docker push docker.mobiledgex.net. Then I have to put my application name and version here. So I'm gonna type SQL Server and 1.0. So now what is happening is I'm uploading my image that I just created, which is basically this server, to their registry, so I can run it on their like back end. Alright, so it looks like the image was uploaded successfully. So I'll just go here and create an application. So I'm gonna go where I wanna deploy it. Let's say I wanna just upload it to the US, And the name of my application, if you remember, it was SQL Server. The version is 1.0, and we use Docker. And I'm just gonna leave it the same. Make sure that you have the correct here. The flavor is like if your server is using a lot of like GPU capabilities and CPU capabilities and stuff like that. We are not. This is just a very small server, so I'm just gonna use the M for .small flavor, and I just need to expose my port, which is 3000, and this port is TCP because we're using like web requests, HTTP 1.1, and I'll just create. I have my app here. So this is the application that I have. I need to create an app instance, which is gonna be the actual application that I'll be using. So I'm gonna go to create instance, and basically you can upload your application onto the app operators like T-Mobile, TELUS if you're in Canada and stuff like that. I'm just gonna use TELUS in Canada, and I'm just gonna upload it to Montreal, Toronto, or I'm gonna upload it only in one place for now. I'm gonna set this to auto create clusters and select IP access. I just use shared. I'll leave those empty and I press create. So it took about like 3 minutes, and I have my app instance running. Just gonna go check if there is any errors. This is my server. This is where I am. I'm just gonna open here and show the logs. Just to make sure that there is no errors on the server. Voila, no errors. And this is like the same as I used to have on my machine. Now I'll jump to Unity and make sure that this server is working correctly. So I have an empty Unity project here, and so I have an empty Unity project here, and I will be creating the C# client for the SQL server that we just created. I already deployed the server to MobiledgeX backend, and I'll use their Unity SDK, so I can access my server. So I'm just gonna go to Package Manager, and I'll import the SDK from add package from get URL. I'm using Unity 2019. If you're using other versions, just go check their Unity SDK docs. They have another requirement for that. So I'm just gonna put the URL of the SDK, which is this one .git. So this is the GitHub package, or the get URL for the package. I'll just press add, and hopefully this will add the package to our project. And I've just tried to make sure my application already exists. So I'm just gonna type here that my organization name is Ahmed Shoot, and my application name is SQL Server 1.0. Just gonna press setup. They can't find my package. Let me go to the MobiledgeX and check. Ahmed underscore shoot. So type underscore here. Yeah, so it's connected, so which means that right now I'm connected to my server. Next, I'll start by creating. So the way I'm gonna do this is I'm gonna create first the user data structure, since we are using this in to send the JSON data, and then I will create the web requests in one script, and the other one will be for the data structures. So I'll create the data structures first. So I'm gonna type data or user protocol, and here I don't need any of this. I just see I'm gonna delete it. I'm just gonna type using system, and then I'm gonna create my class, which is gonna be user. I just make it serializable by Unity, so I'm gonna add this attribute, and I'm gonna head to the server just to remember. So here actually, so the ID is a text, the username is a text, the age is an integer, and height is real, which can be float or double. And I'm gonna do the same here, string. I'm gonna make it public, string ID, and then public string username, and public int age, public float height. So that should be it. I'm just gonna add a constructor here. Generate one. So now I have a constructor for user. So after I created the constructor, I'm just gonna I want this ID to be unique. I don't want to pass it, so I'm just gonna delete this one and say this with ID for GUID dot new GUID and the toString. So GUID is like it's a unique ID in C#, and now I have my constructor and uses the user data structure. I'm just gonna add another method to the class, which is string to JSON, and this is basically I wanna when this function called, I wanna return JSON of the user. I think I need Unity for this, Unity engine, and I'd use JSON utility and return JSON utility to JSON, and then I'm gonna pass the object this, which is like the class itself. So this is the user data structure. If you remember also here in the I think in get users, So in get users here, or actually in the app.js, here we return response.users, which is an array of users obtained from the database. So I'm just gonna add another class in C# for users, which is just going to contain it's going to contain a list of users. And I get public. This is to avoid nesting serialization, which is a problem in Unity. And in order for me to use list, which is a generic collection, I have to type using system.collections.generic, and here I'm gonna just pass it a list of users, and I will rename it users as we have on our server. I'll give it also the serialize attribute, and this should be the user protocol or the data structure that we'll be using. Gonna head back to Unity. So after we created the user protocol, next we'll need to create our web requests that we'll be sending. And for this, I'm just gonna create C# script, and I will name it web requests or manager, and I will open it in Visual Studio. And for this we'll be using we can use Unity web request, but personally I like HTTP client more, so I'll be using system.net.http, and I think that's it. That's what we need. We can fix this later if we need anything. And here I'm gonna add my functions for the web requests. So I'll have one for get users, one for insert or create users, and one for update user, and one for delete user. So I'll start creating the web requests. So for the creating the user, I'll just type public. I return a boolean whether this request were successful or not. I'll just name the function create user. I'll pass a user. I'll name it new user. And we need to pass this user in the form of JSON to the server. So I'm gonna create form content equal new string content, and I'll pass the new user to JSON, which we created. And I need also to specify the encoding. For this, I think we need using system text, so we can call the encoding enumerators coding.utf8, and also I need to specify the header type. For this one is application/JSON. So now I have the form content. So I need to using this client, I need to receive the data using the HTTP response message. I'm just gonna name it response equal client post asynchronous. I'm gonna run an asynchronous function here, and the data I will pass is first is the URL, which is the base URL plus create underscore user, and the form content, which is form content, and then I'll just use get awaiter, get result. Now that we received the data in HTTP response message, I want to retrieve the content as a string, so I'm just gonna create response string equal response dot content dot read as a string asynchronously get awaiter dot get result. So now that we have the response here, I'm just gonna check if the response string equal success return true and else I return false. It's telling me that, yeah, so I forgot to add the public encapsulation for those, so I can access them easily. And now the error is resolved. So this is for create users. If you remember, update and create user are very similar, so I'm just gonna copy and paste. I'm just gonna name this update user. And here I'm just gonna change it to users since it's not new. And I'll change the base, the path to update user. And the same, if the response is success, return true, otherwise false. So update users and create user are created. I'm gonna copy this and paste it and delete user. We'll do certain changes. So here we need to pass an ID, we don't need the whole user. So I'm just gonna type ID. And we are not sending JSON here, we are just sending a form. So I'm gonna type new form, form URL encoded content, and just gonna type new array. This is like the array of the data in the form. And I'm just gonna add a new key value pair string and string, maybe no space, and I'll pass the data here, which is ID and ID. It's giving me an error here because I'm passing it in like curly brackets. I just need to use regular brackets. And I just need to change this to delete user, and also the pass to delete user, and the function will behave the same. Finally is the get users. So the get users will also, we are not gonna return a boolean, we are going to return users, which is the like a data structure that contains a list of users, and we will name the function get users, and we will pass nothing, and it's gonna be it's gonna be a get request, response message equal response client of get asynchronous, and then I'm gonna pass the base URL plus get users, and then I'm just gonna add my get awaiter dot get result, and here also I need to convert get the response string to response content dot read as string, and since this is an asynchronous function, I need to use my get awaiter dot get result. And the next part is I need to convert this JSON string to our object, which is users. So I'm gonna say users, I'll name my variable also users equal, I'm gonna use the JSON utility to convert from JSON to the object. So I'm gonna type JSON utility from JSON, and here I have to specify the type, which is gonna be users, and I'll pass here the response string that we just retrieved here, and finally I'll return users. I'll just have a small test here. So if input the get key down, key code, let's say A, I want to create a user, so I'm just gonna say user equal new user. I'll pass here the my name, for example, and 27, and let's say I just want to pass any float, so I'm gonna say 2.5. It's actually a float. So now we created a user using the constructor that we created, and then I'm gonna just create a user. I'll pass here the user. Actually, I'm just gonna check if the user was created successfully. So I'm gonna type pool user created. We'll create user, and then if the user is created successfully, I wanna first get users. I'm gonna call get users equal get users, and I'm just gonna run for each user, for each single user, because I already used the variable name, and users print single users. I just print it to JSON so I can read it easily. And users dot users, which is or users list dot users. So I'm gonna print the users, and let's try this out in Unity. I have to add here the manager. and I'll play, I'll press A, socket exception connection refused, which is expected because I'm not running my server. So I'm just gonna go back to Visual Studio and node app.js. I have first of all to get back my node modules. Node app.js. The server is listening. I'm gonna go to Unity, rerun the scene, and press A, and voila, the user is created and we got the user. Okay, so this is the function working on Unity on the local host. Let's go another step and try to get it working on the server that we just deployed. So I'm gonna open manager again. I'm gonna use the MobiledgeX SDK. Now that we connected to the local machine and tried our server, I'm just gonna try to connect to the server that we already deployed using the MobiledgeX SDK that we imported to our Unity project. So to do this, I'm just gonna type using MobiledgeX, and here I'm just gonna use mono behavior callback start, which happens at the very first frame. And I'm gonna make the start function asynchronous. So the way it works, I have my application deployed on in Toronto, if I remember, in Canada. So I wanna, in case I have the same server deployed in multiple places, I wanna reach the closest one to me. Since we have only one, so I'm just gonna type MobiledgeX integration mxi, just a random name, equal new MobiledgeX integration. This class basically is gonna help us get the URL, and then I'm gonna say mxi.register and find cloudlet. What will do, it will register with the backend or with MobiledgeX services and find the closest app to us. And this is a synchronous call, asynchronous call. So I'm just gonna await it, wait for it to be done. And once this is happening, I'll specify the protocol I wanna use. Here I wanna use TCP. If you remember, when we were creating the application, it asks us, are you using TCP or UDP? So I'm gonna specify TCP. And finally, I wanna override this base URL to equal mxi.getURL, and I wanna use this protocol HTTP, so I'll pass it here, and then we'll have the URL that will be used in our functions, the one that is running, that is deployed already. So now that we have this, let's try again the same example that we ran on our local machine. I'll head back to Unity and press Control Play. As you see, it's connected to the server. Just clear the logs, and when I press A, what should happen is that we create a new user with a random ID, and this create user will insert this new user to the database. And if all of this happens successfully, I'll run get users, and this get users will print out all of the users in the database. Okay, so I'm just gonna press A, and voila, I got my I added a new user to the database. I can press A one more time and I'll create another user called Ahmad and the same age, same height, but with a different unique ID, because this is unique. I'm gonna press A again, and see, we got the same database. I'm gonna press A one more time, and we have 3 users in the database. Let's try to delete one of those guys. So I'm just gonna copy the unique ID and go to Visual Studio, and instead of creating a new user, I'm just gonna comment this out, this one out, and type pool user deleted equal delete user, using this unique ID that we just copied. And if user deleted, retrieve the data from the database. And let's run. The URL is retrieved, and then press A, and voila, we have only 2 users. I'm gonna try the update user, so I'm just gonna take this user and try to update the name, for example. So I'm gonna take the unique ID, and I'll go here, let's say create user, this one. I'm just gonna set the name to Garner, and the age to 34. I'll just keep the height the same, and then I'll set the ID to the one I just copied. And here, instead of user deleted, I'm just gonna run the update function. So user updated equal update user, and I'll pass this user. And if user updated, I wanna see all the data. Jump back to Unity. I'm just gonna clear and press A, and we have updated the user to Garner, and the age is 34. I think that's it. We tried delete, update, create, and we're already getting the users.